Behind the Story.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Hara. This is Chief Investigator Jeremy Finley, and you're watching Behind the Story, where we take time to do a deeper dive into some of the stories that you've seen on TV, but maybe we didn't have enough time to fully talk about the full context with. So we're going to focus on your investigation into Partners in Care, which is a program launched by Metro Police. So walk us through what this does and kind of the top line of your investigation.
Sure. So there is no question, first of all, this is a great program. This is exactly the kind of program that the city needs right now. It partners with Metro Police officers and licensed clinicians that can respond to mental health calls. So on the surface, it sounds great. The problem that we have found is that there are so many calls coming, they can't keep up with demand.
And so you had a couple of examples of this. So Kim Lively is one of the people you interviewed, and she had made, 4 calls for help in about 2 months. And it was regarding her son who was in a mental health crisis. Right. So we're going to hear some of those calls that she made, but give us some context before we listen to them.
So Kim reached out to me about a year ago. We've been working on this story and this investigation for about a year. And she said, look, when we called for help from specialized clinicians, they didn't come. They told us they were coming, but they didn't come. Only police officers came. So in this case, Kim wanted, listen, if a police officer comes, okay. But the reality is I need a mental health expert to come and help with my son because he is in the midst of a mental health crisis, and we don't want him to go to jail. We want him, if he has to go to a hospital. But every time, only a untrained police officer, untrained in mental health rather, arrived. And that's what got us looking into this. Wait a second, if we have these teams, why is this happening? And again, ultimately what we found is that there are simply so many calls, there aren't enough people to respond that have this kind of training.
And you can hear some of the desperation in her voice in some of these phone calls, so take a listen.
I'm not a psychiatrist. Somebody has got to get this boy some help. We need to get help before he hurts somebody or he hurt himself.
Okay, so at a certain point, the mobile crisis team even gets involved, and they say, you know what? Yeah, we think that we need to deliver on this request. So explain what the mobile crisis team is and does, and what happened after they got involved with some of these phone calls from Kim.
Sure. So ultimately what happens is that when you're in a mental health emergency or a loved one is, you can call the city's mental health crisis line. It's often referred to as the mobile crisis. So you call, they kind of talk you through it, but then if they feel like a police officer also needs to get involved or a Partners in Care team needs to get involved, then they can transfer, they call the 911, say, listen, we need one of the teams, we need an officer that's trained in this, and can you please send that person out? So they're almost like a middleman that helps in mental health crises.
And you can hear him getting involved in this call that they had with dispatchers.
I'm with the Davidson County Mobile Crisis Team. What we would ideally like to see happen is for our CIT, our North CIT folks, be involved in this.
We're going to talk about exactly what happened to Kim's son in just a second, but you also spoke with the aunt, and she explained to you why she was so desperate for this help to come.
Yeah, this was tough because we were able to speak with several family members in this case because they'd all called for help. And in this case, the aunt was so concerned that if he didn't get expert mental health care, then something bad was going to happen to him.
All right, take a listen.
We were just trying so hard. And me personally, I knew something was gonna happen. And I knew that if they didn't help him, that he was gonna die, and he did.
So walk us through the circumstances that ultimately led to his death.
So what happened was the family called a police officer, several police officers arrived. Instead of taking him to a hospital or getting examination for mental health, they took him to jail, which as we know as reporters happens all the time, because if they don't have the manpower to, their only option if someone is a danger to himself or to a police officer, they're going to take him to jail if they have committed some kind of crime. Bottom line, he went to jail, spent a little bit of time in jail, was released, a couple of days later walked out into traffic and was killed.
Do we know if that was intentional? Was it suicide?
So from what the family says is that he was in such a state of paranoia. He was afraid that people were poisoning his food. And so they believed that he was either in such a state of confusion or perhaps suicide. It's really unfortunate and really unknown, but they know that he was so sick at that point that, you know, anything like that could happen.
And bottom line is they say he didn't get the help he needed by going to jail. That wasn't where he was going to get help.
Yes, that's where they wanted to go. And so many families are in this situation because, you know, they can't always afford or they can't always get a person to a hospital to get the kind of care that they need. He had been institutionalized in the past, but as we know with mental health, it's a fluid thing. It comes and goes. And so all they knew to do was to reach out to the mobile crisis. And they knew that they had clinicians that could come out. It's just in each one of these times, these teams just weren't available.
All right, so we're hearing a lot about a problem. We know that there's a solution. There's an infrastructure for a solution. So the big question is, okay, why? You know, why is this happening? And you pulled the data that showed this goes well beyond Kim's story.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did was we always want to put data to our stories. And what we ultimately found is that we looked at all the cases where 911 was requested to send either a CIT officer, which is an officer that has been trained in mental health, or one of the Partners in Care program, to one of the Partners in Care teams. So what we found was that in less than half of the times, these teams, these specially trained people were able to respond. Less than half of the times that people asked for them. And so we then, of course, went to the program itself and asked, hey, what's going on? And ultimately they said, look, we just can't keep up with demand. We don't have enough of these teams.
And that was part of the conversation that you showcased in your investigation.
I'm wondering what the message is for the people of the city. When they call and they can't get a Partners in Care team, what are they supposed to do?
We're going to look at the data when the calls are coming in, look at what calls we're missing, where do we need to expand next? It's always a data-forward approach.
All right, so let's talk about that. What does come next? I mean, where does this stand?
Right, so, you know, so many times in these investigations, we want immediate answers, right? We were like, look, people, this is a crisis. People need this kind of help. It all comes down to money.
Right.
And so many times with government, it comes down to money. If they had the finances to hire more police officers and more clinicians that could be in these teams and get them the training, then this kind of problem could be addressed, but it all comes down to money. So it's really going to see over the next, we're going to be monitoring to see if the city puts more money towards these programs to get more of these people out there. The police know, the mental health experts know this is truly the way to respond to this, is to not just send out police officers because their jobs are hard enough as it is, but to send them out with people who are trained that can say, look, let me help this person. Let me see what I can do to help this person, and not just send them to jail and not just arrest them.
Do we know how many of these Partners in Care mental health clinicians are actually available to respond on any given day?
So what we know is that they are available Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to midnight, which is pretty good scope, but that also means weekends. There's no crews on weekends.
Right.
It also means that if there aren't enough teams, and so there's roughly about 16 to 20 of these clinicians that are spread out throughout the week, but you got to think about a number of calls that are coming in. There's just not enough of them. And so that's truly what we're finding and what our city and cities all across the nation are grappling with.
All right, well, more to come as, you know, you've highlighted this problem. We'll see where it lands and what comes next with a possible solution or maybe efforts to expand this to be more broad.
Let's hope so. It's a great program. It's just the reality of what we're facing.
All right, Jeremy Finley with his